What would you do if the very son you raised plotted your death for money? Don't just watch this story, live it with me, and subscribe for more tales of betrayal and revenge. My name is Evelyn, though most people call me Evie. I'm 72 years old, and I thought nothing in life could shock me anymore, until the day my only son tried to kill me. It started like a dream. Michael, my boy, showed up one morning with a golden envelope, smiling like the child I once cradled in my arms. Inside, first-class cruise tickets. 7 days through the Caribbean, all expenses paid. "Mom, you've given me everything," he said, hugging me. "Now it's my turn to give back." For a moment, my heart swelled with joy. I'd sacrificed my entire life for him, long shifts, endless bills, no vacations. Maybe, just maybe, he had finally realized it. But mothers, especially old ones like me, develop instincts sharper than any knife. And something in his eyes didn't match his words. His hug felt staged. His smile forced. I brushed it aside, chalking it up to paranoia. The morning of my departure, I realized I'd forgotten my blood pressure pills at home. I slipped inside quietly and froze when I heard Michael's voice. On the phone, with his wife. "Don't worry, Linda. It's a one-way ticket. Once she's on the high seas, it'll look like an accident. The insurance will cover everything." My knees nearly buckled. My son, my flesh and blood, was calmly discussing my death like a business deal. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just stood there, my heart breaking and hardening all at once. If he thought his mother was a helpless old woman, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. I boarded that cruise, but not as his victim. I boarded as a hunter. My plan? To survive, to gather evidence, and to make him regret the day he ever underestimated me. The ship was dazzling, a floating palace of glass and light. Pools, casinos, restaurants, laughter everywhere. But I wasn't here for pleasure. Every step I took was about survival. The cabin Michael booked for me had a private balcony. Convenient, wasn't it? One slip, one accident, and his plan would be complete. I stared at that railing and whispered to myself, "Not today, son, not ever." That night, I made my first call to Victor Stone, a private detective I once met by chance. "My son is trying to kill me," I told him. "And I need you to dig into every debt, every secret. I'll be back in 7 days. Find me proof." He believed me, and so the game began. The next day, while eating lunch alone, I spotted her. Carol, silver hair, sharp eyes, the kind of woman you know has fought battles life never recorded. We struck up a conversation, and within hours, I knew this woman could be my ally. When she asked why I looked tense, I almost lied. But the truth burned too heavy in my chest. "My son wants me dead," I whispered. She didn't flinch, didn't laugh. She leaned in, her voice steady. "Then let's make sure you live." That night my phone rang. "Michael, how's the cruise, Mom?" His voice was honey, but I could hear the poison beneath it. "It's beautiful," I said sweetly. "I met a friend." "Carol, she's been good company." Silence. A pause too long. Then, "That's nice, Mom. Just be careful. Some people take advantage of older passengers." Carol scribbled on a napkin and slid it across to me. "He's testing you. Checking if you're alone." The longer we spoke, the clearer his mask slipped. When I asked about my return ticket, he stumbled, hesitated, then assured me everything was handled. But I'd already checked, there was no return booked. Michael wasn't sending me on vacation. He was sending me to my grave. And that's when I decided if he wanted an accident, I'd give him one. Only this time, he'd be the one to fall. She said she'd stay with me. Carol promised me her cabin was a fortress and a listening post, and for the first time in years I felt a sliver of safety. We moved my things in silence like conspirators, underwear folded, pills in a little case, a cardigan she insisted I keep on the balcony even if it was hot. We made jokes when the ship's orchestra played, because pretending felt safer than trembling. But underneath the laughter was a machine of quiet work, call logs saved, receipts photographed, conversations recorded on old-fashioned voice memos that Carol insisted on storing in 3 different places. Redundancy, she said. If one thing fails, another picks up the slack. I liked that phrase. I liked that she spoke like an engineer who'd built bridges instead of a woman who'd raised children and outlived husbands. Michael called 3 times that afternoon. Each time I answered with the same measured sweetness and the same purpose, to bait him into revealing the shape of his plan. When he asked where I was on deck, I told him exactly where I would be. When he asked about the gala, I told him what dress I'd chosen. I wanted him to think he still had control. He did not. The more he spoke, the more he supplied us with the choreography of his crime, the times, the weak places, the awkwardness he expected to exploit. "Just stay away from the railings," he said once, the warning more instructive than tender. I heard no remorse in his tone, only the cold efficiency of a man arranging logistics. He believed I was fragile. He was wrong again. We had one live wire on our side, a private detective in Chicago, Victor Stone, who, to my surprise and shame, had taken me seriously from the moment I told him the story. While I was rehearsing smiles at dinner, he was digging into bank records, pulling credit statements, and determining where Michael's debts led. Carol and I passed him every scrap we could. Screenshots of messages, the cruise office's note, one-way ticket, and the receipts for the return flight I'd been forced to buy myself. Victor sent a terse text. He's not just in debt. He's desperate. He's pulled in someone. Watch for a man who doesn't belong. That "doesn't belong" phrase is the kind of phrase that sits heavy in the air. It makes your skin tighten and your eyes search a room for something they weren't prepared to see. We saw him at the pool, first green shirt, 2 long hair, a posture like a man accustomed to watching people. He didn't belong. He followed me sometimes casually and other times with a careful patience that felt like a predator's rhythm. Carol taught me to be theatrical in small ways, limp a little by the lockers, pretend the world spins, let your bag dangle as if you'd forgotten it. Predators love a predictable script. He took the bait. He asked where my cabin was. He complimented a smile I wasn't offering. We recorded him humming the same lines I'd overheard in Michael's messages. "She's on 8, balcony." Quiet, a little unsteady, easy to slip. My stomach folded into itself like a fist. That night, we went to the captain. Carol carried herself like a woman who'd given board meeting presentations to men who thought they owned the world. I learned quickly to mirror her courage. Captain Harrison had eyes that read maps, and when we laid the facts before him, recorded calls, the one-way ticket, the man who followed me, his face tightened but didn't flicker with the theatrical sympathy tourists expect. He listened, like a man who'd been given the blueprints for mischief and was deciding how to dismantle them. "You'll have security posted discreetly," he said. "We'll increase patrols. We'll install temporary cameras. No one gets off the ship tonight without a second look." He slid us a small panic device, an innocuous key fob that would set 24 officers swarming to any corridor the moment we pressed it. The captain's plan was surgical. Don't make a scene, let the predator think he has the night, let him reveal himself. The gala was the perfect stage. People in gowns and suits move like a river that hides its currents. We drifted through it, smiles perfected, champagne flutes raised like shields. The man was there, veiled by a crowd, an island in black cotton. He watched me like one watches a timed fuse. Carol and I sipped, danced, and let the orchestra drown out our breath. Every so often I'd lock eyes with him and look away as if by accident. He came closer at 11:30, just close enough to be noticed, not arrested. He checked the timestamp of my exit from the ballroom as though performing a ritual. We left the ballroom in a small procession, me, a woman of 72 who'd learned to feign fatigue, Carol tighter, watchful, and a couple who looked like they'd married last week and were drunk on the occasion. I took the elevator to the 8th deck where my balcony waited like a trap laid by a thief. I felt the ship sway and told myself the ocean was an honest thing. It didn't betray. Men did. In the stairwell we crouched, hidden, while our signal went out to the security team. For 30 minutes we listened to the ship's bones creak and wondered which sound was the footfall of the man who'd been hired to make my death look like an accident. At 0012, a figure moved through the corridor, a careful silhouette, black gloves, a slither of light from a pocket flashlight. He had tools. He had the confidence of someone who'd been paid to be quick. He tried the door to my cabin. It was locked. He worked at it like a man with practice, swift, efficient, brutal. We watched him stall at the balcony, his hands measuring the railing as if deciding if a fall could be blamed on the sea. When the alarm jumped the corridor, his movements froze. For a second, I thought the world would end with a fight. Instead, men sprang from the walls like trained birds, crew members and plainclothes security. They pinned him before he could move. He was small and furious, and his mouth opened like a trapped rat's. He yelled for help, and to be released, he fought like a cornered boy, all animal and no plan. They cuffed him. One of them found his phone in his pocket. It chimed with a text the color of betrayal, a string of instructions: tonight. After gala. Balcony. Make it look like accident. No struggle. The officer read it to me aloud like an epitaph. They took him to a secure room where he yelled names and threatened things, but when they connected his phone to the ship's system, the messages that bled through were from Michael. Michael's numbers were there like a poison signature. The evidence was immediate and sharp, but I knew evidence is a thing that must be arranged into a story before a court will understand it. Phone logs, recorded conversations, witness statements. We had assembled the narrative carefully. The ship's captain and his team had executed it exactly. The next morning dawned too early, and the man sat in a plastic chair with bandaged knuckles, eyes too bright. He talked like a man who had been paid and then abandoned. "I thought it was a job," he said. "I didn't know it was family." That line made me steady with a terrible calm. There are crimes that shock because they're sudden. There are crimes that shock because they strip everything of its old truth. When your child arranges your death, your world loses the names you used to call things by. The man's confession was a scorch mark on my heart, and an ugly, necessary key to the cell door of my son. Victor called from Chicago with the kind of voice people use when they have peeled an onion down to the last layer. He'd been chasing money through credit cards, loan statements, and shell accounts. Michael's debts were deeper and uglier than we'd imagined, almost $200,000 in bad bets, forged documents pledging my name as collateral, a house used as his lever. Linda, Michael's wife, had helped. She'd booked the one-way ticket. She'd whispered reassurance to a man she was willing to betray for a bank account that would buy them both a new life. The state had a map now. My son and his wife were certain to be waiting at the docks in cuffs when the ship returned. I called Michael that afternoon. The line went to voicemail, and I left him a message with the slow cadence of a woman who had been at the bottom of something and clawed her way out. "Michael," I said, "you made a mistake thinking you could buy my silence. You underestimated the thing that mothers learn: patience. You thought my years had made me soft. You were wrong. When I get home, I will give everything to the people who will make sure you pay for this. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am reporting your crimes." My voice did not shake. It felt like an instrument tuned to a pitch he could not reach. Carol squeezed my hand after I hung up. "We've taken his map," she said. "Now it's time to close the trap." I watched the ocean that night through my balcony glass and felt a curious freedom. The sea washed away a life I had been carrying, the life of a woman who had put her son before herself in every trivial and catastrophic way. In its place came a life that belonged to me, raw and unapologetic. The arrest of the man in the suit had been the first ripple. The coming arrests of Michael and Linda would be the tide. I found I was not thinking of revenge as spectacle. Revenge, if it's anything, is a precise instrument. It is the setting right of a balance that was wronged. When the ship docked at the end of the cruise, the port was full of the ordinary bustle of vacations ending, canoes at the ready, suitcases rolling, families hugging. For me, walking down the gangway felt like stepping into a courtroom the world had not yet assembled. Detectives with Victor's names on their badges were waiting. They took statements, gathered files, and pinned evidence with the seriousness of surgeons. I told them everything, answered questions with a clarity that came out of pain tempered into resolve. I felt like a woman who had been given a second life in the currency of truth. The arrests came like the turning of the tide. Michael and Linda were found at home with packed bags, 2 tickets to South America on the kitchen counter, their faces still in that white, fragile denial. The cuffs closed around them, and in that hollow moment I felt pity, and something sharper relief. In the weeks that followed, the court case was a river that ran through my life and through everyone who had been part of it. I testified. The man in the green shirt named names. The captain and his crew gave statements. Victor produced bank statements like exhibits in a tragedy. The lawyers moved with their own choreography, and justice, slow and stubborn, traveled the last miles. Michael's eyes in court were the eyes of a boy who had traded his better self for a ledger. Linda's face was a map of small, cruel compromises. I sat in the gallery and watched them reduced by the mechanism they thought they commanded. They had bet against their own mother and lost more than money. When the judge read the sentences, I felt no triumph. There was only a settling, like a book closing. They would pay, properly and painfully, for what they attempted. I walked out into a world that was lighter by degrees. Carol took me out to lunch after the verdict, just 2 women with a bill to split and a sky wide enough to hold the future. She said, "You did more than survive, Evie. You rewrote the rules." I looked at her and thought about the balcony where death had almost been scripted and how improbable it felt that safety had been crafted from courage and a few well-placed recordings. I thought about the soft smallness of cooking chicken for a son who'd wanted me dead. I thought about throwing that dish away and not looking back. That night, alone in my small apartment back in the city I'd once thought too cramped to breathe, I made a choice. I would not let the story of my life be dominated by the moment my own child decided I was collateral. I would move forward, volunteer, dance, meet people who weren't counting the cost of my presence. But I kept the little panic device in a drawer, a talisman of what had been necessary and a reminder of the cost of trust. Carol called every week. Victor checked in like a professional who felt some private satisfaction in victories against human greed. If you asked me then whether I believed in cruelty among kin, I'd say yes. If you asked whether I forgave, I'd say no. If you asked whether I was happier, I'd say something truer: I was free. The trial was brutal, but not for me. For once, the pain wasn't mine to carry. It was Michael's turn to explain himself, to squirm under the weight of the evidence he thought would never exist. The prosecution laid it all out like a puzzle whose pieces had always been there. He just assumed I was too blind to put them together. The texts to the hired man, the one-way ticket, the voice recordings where his careful words slipped into cold calculations. Linda's voice echoed too, her rehearsed phrases about a long break, matching his word for word. Their lies sounded almost comical when played back in court. I sat there in my green cardigan, steady and unshaken, while my son, the same boy I once rocked to sleep, looked at me with eyes that begged for mercy. But mercy is for the innocent. The jury didn't take long. 18 years for Michael, 8 for Linda. When the gavel struck, it wasn't victory I felt. It was justice. And maybe a little freedom. I sold the house soon after. Too many ghosts in those walls. His laughter as a child, his silence as an adult, the venom I overheard that one terrible morning. With the money, I bought a small apartment, nothing fancy. Just mine. Life became simpler, sharper. I volunteered at a women's shelter, telling my story not as tragedy but as proof. Proof that age doesn't make you weak. Proof that betrayal doesn't have to end you. Proof that you can fight back even when the world expects you to crumble. Some women cried when I told them what happened. Others clenched their fists, finally seeing their own strength reflected back. One woman whispered, "If you can survive that, maybe I can survive this." And that was enough. Carol and I never drifted apart. She called every week, sometimes twice, her laugh carrying across the miles like sunlight. We visited each other when we could, Two old women who had learned that friendship forged in fire burns brighter than blood. 2 years later, she asked me at dinner, "Do you regret it, Evie? Do you ever wish you'd kept quiet, kept him safe, pretended you didn't know?" I looked at her and smiled, not bitter but certain. No, because the son I thought I had never existed. The man who stood before that jury was the truth, and I chose to stop lying to myself. The world still underestimates women my age. They see the wrinkles, the gray hair, the hands that tremble when pouring tea. They don't see the storms we've survived, the sacrifices we've endured, the strength we've stored quietly for decades. Michael thought I was too old to fight back. He thought wrong. Now, when I stand in my little apartment, music on, dancing in the kitchen just because I can, I remind myself of one thing: survival is not enough. Living, truly living, is the revenge. And every time I take a step to the beat of a song, every time I laugh with Carol until our sides ache, every time I tell another woman she is stronger than she knows, I win. Michael sits in a cell counting days. I count sunsets. That is the difference between us. So if you're listening, if you've ever been betrayed, underestimated, pushed aside, remember this: your age, your pain, your scars, they are not weaknesses, they are weapons. And when you finally decide to use them, the world won't know what hit it. If Evelyn's story shook you, imagine what's coming next. Betrayal, justice, revenge. Subscribe now because the next twist might be darker than you ever imagined.